everyone, and welcome to this Women of AIDC presentation on leveraging AI for a safer today and tomorrow. I am Bethany Dean, the Media and Communications Specialist here at AIM and the staff liaison for this industry group. We are happy to have you all join us today for this exciting guest presentation, but before we get started, I'd like to quickly go over a few things. First, wanted to highlight AIM's antitrust policy. It is a policy of AIM to conduct its operations in strict compliance with the antitrust laws. No AIM activity shall create even the appearance of a violation of the letter or spirit of the antitrust laws. Next, our collaboration and work product policy. AIM committee meetings are held for the primary purpose of advancements in our industry, which necessarily involves development of work product intended solely for the public domain. AIM has developed this policy for the protection of its members who engage in this important collaborative effort. And then a few other housekeeping notes. All participants are muted upon entering the meeting, but we do want you to participate. If during the presentation you have a question, please submit through the Q&A application at the bottom of the screen. Questions will be answered at the end of the presentation, and a recording of this session will be available in the coming days. And with that, I will turn it over to AIM Global Vice Chair and Zebra's Senior Sales Manager, RFID Retail and Hospitality, Patty Blessing.
Good morning, good afternoon. Thank you for joining us. The mission of this group is to empower women in AIDC, and we do that through fostering leadership, innovation, and inclusion. This exciting group started earlier this year in February, and we're proud that this group continues to grow and hope that these webinars provide a knowledge and information to you, as well as networking opportunities. I want to turn it over now to Julie McGill to introduce today's speaker.
All right. Thanks so much, Patty. So we are really excited to have Purni here today from Chick-fil-A. Dr. Purni Wickramasinghe has been with Chick-fil-A since 2021. There she leads their strategic food safety risk management and mitigation initiatives across their organization. In her current role, she leverages advanced machine learning and AI technologies to assess, quantify, and manage food safety risks at an enterprise level. I'm going to go through a couple things. I was so impressed, Purni, when I was reading your bio. You have a bachelor's degree in biomedical sciences, a master's in food microbiology, and a PhD in food microbiology with an emphasis on natural products chemistry. So for the group, I heard a similar presentation earlier this year at the Food Safety Summit, and it was just such a powerful session. The content was just absolutely fantastic. But on top of it, when we talk about women in AIDC and this work group, a lot of you on these calls are trailblazers in things like RFID, in data management, in systems and analytics and things like that. So I thought, boy, she would be a perfect fit for this networking group. And so with that, Purni, I will hand it over to you to deliver your presentation.
All right. Hi, everyone. My name is Purni. Good morning, good afternoon, wherever you guys are. I'm on the Eastern time zone, so it's still a little bit into the morning for about 55 more minutes. And Julie, thank you for inviting me to participate in your session and share some really cool things about leveraging AI for our safer today and tomorrow in terms of restaurant food safety. All right, I'm going to kick it off with a disclaimer I made at Food Safety Summit before we actually dive into this content. The goal of AI should really not be to replace human thinking. The goal of AI should be to enhance human thinking. So hold on to that thought as we go through this conversation. You'll be able to see how we can navigate that in a very clear and a kind way, where we're only continuing to enhance human thinking and capabilities as opposed to replacing those. So with that, why does food safety risk assessment or just food safety management need an upgrade with AI? And this is it's very interesting questions. If I ask my mom or my husband, what does food safety mean to you? They will say, okay, I will cook my chicken to 165-degree Fahrenheit. I will not leave my rice that's cooked overnight at room temperature. I will try to hold my warm things warm and cold things cold. And it sounds very, very simple and easy. But for those of us who live in the food safety space, it's not the reality. The reality of food safety is like an iceberg. So the tip of it is what somebody who's really out of the industry can see. Where you just make sure your food is cooked to the right temperature, you just hold it at the right temperature, and you continue to go about your day. It sounds very simple. But if you are in the food business, whether it's from an industry standpoint, whether it's from a regulatory standpoint, whether it's from academic standpoint, you understand the true complexity that comes with it. So this is what's under the water for that iceberg. In my case, I work for Chick-fil-A, so we are in the chicken business. We are a restaurant company. So the restaurant complexity of all of it. We have 3,000 locations within the continental United States. We have restaurants across the world now. We have restaurants in Canada. We have restaurants in the UK. And we are opening a restaurant in Singapore. So if you think about it, there's just so many different restaurants across the world for just one company. And there's so much complexity associated with executing a process, managing the risk across a process, and just a simple variability that exists. And then there's the regulatory scrutiny, right? So you have, for the US, we have the FDA food code, and then you have local level regulations, state level regulations. And then on top of that, for us now, we have international regulations that we had to meet, which just only complicates food safety a little bit more. And then we have manual checks that we have to do. If I'm getting a delivery of my produce items, my team members, especially if it's the pre-processed items, have to check for the temperature, how they log that information, how they manage that information. That's another complexity. And then the continued food demand. I think continued food demand and global supply chain tend to go together, and we learned a lot about this during COVID, where we learned like, hey, that one thing that you really want doesn't just come from the US. It has to come from this part of the world and this part of the world, and they have to come together in the United States for you to get it in your restaurant. And then finally, the most common thing that we know about food safety is the foodborne illness. That's just another thing that complicates food safety. It's not just one organism. There's all types of organisms. There's the spoilage organisms, and then there's the ones that can actually make you sick, and there's the ones that really like to grow at cold temperatures, and then there's the ones that can grow at cold temperatures. So that's just another layer of complexity. So overall, if you think about food safety as a holistic system, it's a very complex system. So the reason why it needs AI is to be able to help make sense of it, help make it simple, and help bring it together, all this information that we have in the space of food safety. So for AI, for analytics, for machine learning to be leveraged in food safety, we had the building block of all of that is really the data that we have. So all those things that I talked about earlier as the added complexities, those are actually all data points. As it stands today, we have a lot of siloed and underutilized data. And this is not a bad thing. This is not something to be ashamed of. I think this is something that all companies, all authorities, all different bodies of all different groups in this space struggle with. And that's okay. It's just something we have to acknowledge. We have a lot of data, and they are all siloed, and they don't necessarily talk to each other. And the way we make it make sense is by really getting them to talk to each other. So you need to be able to centralize the data, which will enable us to apply any type of AI models, whatever type of design you have for your machine learning programs, or whatever type of analytics methods you want to leverage to drive insights. The only way you do that in a meaningful way is if you centralize your data, which will then enable us eventually to get to that place where we can make AI informed decisions, or data informed and risk-based decisions in food safety. And the third part of the why is to why are we doing all of this, right? Is to get to this really interesting place of leveraging science and mathematics, right? Because AI and modeling in statistics, analytics, it's in essence mathematics, bringing those two things together to allow us to make strategic business decisions. In my case, it's business decisions. If you're with the regulatory authority, it'll be a decision that drives the future of food safety in whatever country you're in. In academia, it's the next big thing in food safety that you want to publish and work on, right? So now that we understand a little bit of the why, how do we leverage analytics? This is one of my favorite things about analytics is that it's not just one thing. It's not the same data set across industries for all of us. It's not the same method that we all need to use. It's not the same outcome that we all need to get. Different people have different needs. Different companies have different needs. Different companies have different levels of risk and types of risks. So what analytics allows us is to pick and choose exactly what we want to do. It's basically your toolkit. We really like to lean into these 4 big categories. So you have your descriptive analytics, diagnostic analytics, predictive analytics, and prescriptive analytics. Descriptive analytics, I'll try to sort of explore these with an example. Let's say it's a restaurant and you have romaine lettuce. I like to pick on romaine lettuce for whatever reason. So the romaine lettuce today. So you have pre-chopped romaine lettuce that's getting delivered to your restaurant. And you're the team member that's receiving it, and you go to temp it because it's a TCS item. And what you find out is, okay, it's out of temp. It's above 41 degrees and I can't accept it, right? And then you go about your day, and then you have another delivery, and that happens again. So now you're starting to see a trend. Hey, whenever this one supplier supplies the product to my restaurant, I tend to have this similar issue where it's temperature abused by the time it gets to the restaurant. And you as the supplier at that point, or you as the restaurant, compiling all of that data to describe what the challenge is, to measure and summarize the events that's occurring. That's an example of descriptive analytics. And it can be as simple as you putting all of it in Excel and understanding, hey, what are the trends here? And then next up is diagnostic analytics. I think this is where we would sort of pull out of the restaurant at this point. You would be with the supplier or the distributor, where you're like, okay, well, this is happening in my cold chain during the transportation. Why is it happening? So the diagnostic analytics is you trying to understand, pull up all the data, pull out of that very limited view, so to see the big picture and try to figure out what's happening. And you can leverage any type of decision tree models. You can leverage any hierarchical models, etc., to be able to do this part. And then I'm gonna close this out because and then predictive analytics is where you are able to leverage all the information you learned and figure out what potential outcomes will be there. So think about, hey, I'm the distributor once again, and I continue to have this issue. That means I won't be able to supply product to 300 restaurants across this part of the world, or this part of the country, or that part of the country, which will lead to me losing this much revenue. So you're going to be able to define and predict what the outcomes of this specific challenge are that you diagnose the root cause for. And then finally, prescriptive analytics. This is where you're able to understand and pull the strings on those variables. So whatever root causes you identified, if you were to make X, Y, and Z change to that variable, then how is the outcome impacted, right? Is it a positive outcome? Are you solving the issue, or are you continuing to not solve the issue, and maybe it's not the variable you need to be focusing on? So that's where your diagnostic prescriptive analytics come in. So like I said, everybody has different needs. Maybe right now you just need to describe the risk. Maybe you step ahead and you want to diagnose why it's happening. And maybe you went further ahead and you want to get into predictive or prescriptive analytics. Either way, whatever your choice and whatever your need is, you're able to use these various tools that's at hand for you. So with that said, what are some of the models that food safety as an industry can really leverage? These are some of the very basic ones. And I know every time I sort of mention AI, people immediately think ChatGPT, but that's really just one type of AI. It's just a large language model, but I know that's the one that has the most just visibility right now. But I want to highlight all the other types of modeling techniques we can use, and they sort of fall under what I talked about earlier, the diagnostic, descriptive, predictive, and prescriptive. So the first one is predictive modeling. Usually this is the one that's most common in academia, especially where we are leveraging predictive microbiology to understand and predict microbial growth across restaurant processes, or maybe in a specific given scenario, to anticipate food safety risk. So if you can say, hey, if you have a model that predicts E. coli growth across a certain temperature variability, right? So let's say, I don't know, 30 degrees to 50 degrees, you developed your predictive model. You're able to say, hey, if I hold my product for this amount of time at this temperature, your model will be able to like tell you what type of risk you need to be anticipating and what type of growth you're anticipating in your process. And the next one is machine learning. This is a big bucket. This is not just one regression model, but it can be a regression model. It can be something much more complex. Basically, this is a type of model that continues to learn from patterns. I think this is the one that is, these are the models that tend to have a few black boxes in them, where the model can't exactly explain how it got there, but it does allow you to get to a really comfortable prediction. But basically what it does is it detects patterns, and a really good way of leveraging this is leveraging ambient temperatures to predict product temperatures. So you're not just looking at ambient temperatures in a cold holding unit or a warm holding unit and making decisions. You're actually correlating that information to derive product specific information for your chosen item, and then you're able to leverage that to drive your decision making. And then simulations. This is where your Monte Carlo simulations fall in. Some of the really cool ones I've seen and have worked on include a lot of work around norovirus. So imagine if you have somebody who comes into a restaurant who has norovirus, asymptomatic, and they expose a certain number of customers or team members to that illness, then what are the potential outcomes? You can, instead of actually letting it happen, and also like leaning into the data that's out there, because it's really hard to measure an event like this, you can leverage simulation models to define and model those food safety specific scenarios to test potential risk in a very low stakes way. And then real-time monitoring. I think there's a lot of technology out there for this, where cold chain monitoring, I think, is the biggest one, where we look at environmental conditions continuously to enable rapid intervention. This is the one that leans heavily into alerting systems, so that whether it's a driver, whether it's a supplier, whether it's a restaurant, whether it's a team member, can lean into rapid intervention if there are any alarms triggered due to this monitoring systems. And then finally, your large language models. This is where ChatGPT would fall. There are various apps that I've seen that you can chat with to understand food code, to understand outbreak trends, and just lean into the data that's out there, that's fed into a large language model that allows you to have that conversation without having to go through, for example, all the food code to find that one little bit of information that you need to find. So these are a few examples of types of models that is commonly used in the food industry, but also within Chick-fil-A. for my work that we have seen adds a lot of value, and a lot of these things are still being figured out. They're in nascent stages, and that's okay, because it is very much a growing area of exploration, and that's how it should be. And we need to climb with care and confidence. It's okay if you're slow, as long as you're continuing to move towards the direction of embracing the technology that's out there. And okay, so I started this talk by saying the goal of AI is really not to replace the humans. It's to enhance humans. And this is where that human component comes into. We talked about the why, we talked about a few ways of doing it, how are we doing it? But the most important thing to continue to remember and continue to lean on to is the human component. So once you get all your data, you centralize all your data, you apply your models, there's no place in any of this conversation where you don't have your people. People are the string that holds everything together. When you build a model, humans are the ones that are going to have to tune the model for accuracy. Humans are the ones who are going to have to interpret the results to make sure that the insights it's providing make sense. You're going to need your scientists to be able to say, hey, this model, while it's performing this and this is what it's spitting out, this doesn't make sense from a scientific standpoint. You're going to need your food scientist and your food code specialist to be able to help you with that. And you're going to need the same people to interpret the results, because it'll just put out a number. And that number doesn't really mean anything if you don't know how to interpret it and take action against it. And then you're going to need your people to define your risk thresholds, because food safety is not a zero risk game. There's no such thing as zero risk in food safety, because realistically, the way we get to zero risk in food safety is if we stop serving food, and we're not going to do that. So we have to define what's a meaningful risk threshold for your business model, and what are you willing to accept as a business person, but also keeping the customer in mind primarily. And we also need humans to act on alerts, right? So if there's an alerting system based on a real-time monitoring model that you have, you're going to need your people to be able to understand the alert and then also react to the alert. And then finally, you're going to need to humans are going to need to provide context. You're going to need to continue to add meaning to the AI and data. You're going to have to look at the data that you're feeding the model, because garbage in, garbage out. And you're going to have to make sure that the information that it's churning out is actually meaningful. So I'm going to re-emphasize this, and I think it's my third time saying it. There is no component where we are leveraging AI in food safety or really any other industry where we are forgetting the human component. Now, speaking of human component, I also want to try to talk about what and who it takes to succeed. I think the first part is not necessarily human, it's really the data quality. It's the data that it's once again garbage in, garbage out. So you really need good, clean and consistent data to feed into any of your models that you're building. And you may be in the starting point of this, or you may be far into this. I think it's just a ongoing conversation you need to be having, ongoing exploration you need to be doing with your data, because any data pipeline that you have within your organization or at your hand is not good. Like those things break, and we're gonna have to figure out how do we continue to manage that data that's being fed into the pipelines or the models that we are leveraging. So data quality is your first thing. But after that, it's all humans, I promise. So the first one is your personnel who understand microbiology. It doesn't need to be a scientist. Usually scientists drive a lot of the predictive microbiology work, but people who understand the behavior of foodborne pathogens are really important. So somebody, for example, my husband is a data guy. He can build a model for that predicts E. coli growth, for example, but he is not really going to understand the difference between lag phase and log phase. He's not going to understand how the starting load of a bacterial, specific bacteria is going to impact how fast or how slow it grows. So he's not going to be able to account for those specific microbial related factors that's very unique to foodborne pathogens in his model. Therefore, his model is not necessarily going to predict the thing that it should be predicting, because he doesn't necessarily have the background for it. Doesn't mean that math is inaccurate. It just means it needs a little bit context from the science side of it. And like I said in the beginning, we want the science and math to sort of come together for this modeling attempt, especially around predictive modeling. So that brings me to the data science piece. The next two, so data science and data engineering are historically not really considered as food safety related career paths. These are not skills that a lot of us learned in school. And these are not skills that are really emphasized even today in the food safety space. But as we are leaning into AI and analytics even more, we do need these skill sets to play into our chosen field. So you can have your really good data, you can have your microbiologists on staff, but you do need the data scientist who can partner with the microbiologist to be able to continue to build models, but then also evaluate those models and tune those models. And then most importantly, you're going to need a data engineer or multiple data engineers, if you have access to that, to be able to pipeline all the data, because the data that you collect, like I said, it's in different silos. You need to centralize it, you need to feed it to the model, and then you need to make sure it churns out and goes to some type of visualization tool, preferably, so like Tableau or something. That's all your data engineer. The back-end engineering is so important and so critical in the successive work that is so tech heavy and tech driven, that we really need to be considering these skill sets on and within our areas of expertise, especially as we think about food safety and AI in the future. Now, we've talked about the why, talked about the how, and we've talked about who it takes to succeed. And I want to then touch a little bit on what does it mean to succeed in this space. What I've learned is it's new technology. It feels new. It feels hard. Not everybody like math, not everybody like data. And if you throw in a machine learning model or two in there, then everybody usually gets a little nervous, because some of those are, like I said, black box models. So there's gonna be inherent challenges to leveraging AI in food safety. And any model you build is only as good as its adoption rate. So if nobody adopts the model you build, no matter how good your model is in predicting any outcome, it does not matter, because nobody wants to use it, because nobody trusts it. So the best way to get ahead of it is to anticipate the challenges. So these are a few challenges. Right? Data reliability. Like I said, the data quality aspect is so important in ensuring your models and your AI technology is functioning optimally. But data is so hard. There's so much data coming in. There's a lot of optimization that we need to do in terms of data. And then you have to make sure it doesn't break. Your pipelines don't break. So there's a lot of little pieces that goes into ensuring your data is coming in, it's reliable, and it's doing its job. So that's hard, and that's okay. It's a challenge. Like I said, if you're in the beginning of it, if you're in the end of it, either way, you're okay. You just need to be conscious of that situation. And then you're gonna have some accountability issues. And this is something that I've had many conversations around throughout the last couple of years, as I've attended a few of these talks and given some of these talks, is the fact that when AI makes a prediction, or when any of your models make a prediction, who owns the D, who is accountable for it? So for example, if you have some type of a model that you build that predicts outbreak trends, and your model predicted an outbreak, and you looked at it and you were like, okay, I'm going to take all responsibility. I'm going to do everything I can to prevent this outbreak from happening. And you spend a lot of money on it to mitigate any of those risks. But realistically, your model didn't predict as accurately as you thought it did, and really there was no opportunity for an outbreak. Then all the money that you spent to mitigate that risk, was that worth it? Is that what you should be doing in a business capacity? And on the flip side of it, what if your model predicts an outbreak and you as a business don't decide that, or you decide that maybe this is too small, we're not really sure about this prediction, so we don't really want to do anything about it, and then something were to happen, then what? Who takes the accountability? So this is an ongoing conversation, and once again, that's okay. We need to be having those conversations. It's a hard conversation. It doesn't mean that we stifle growth in this area. It just means that we continue to build trust, build our capabilities, and climb with care and confidence, as we say at Chick-fil-A. And then cultural resistant. As anything new, there's gonna be people who resist it because it's new, or because they don't necessarily they don't have all the details to be able to understand it right now. It just feels like a lot. So it's okay. You acknowledge why they feel that way. You have that conversation. You have, whether it's a one-to-one conversation, whether it's a presentation where you share your model, whether you talk about some of its limitations and capabilities, and then you continue to grow through that cultural resistance. And then no room for error. And like I said, it's food safety, so there's really not a lot of room for error. We're dealing with people's lives and safety. We're dealing with kids' lives and safety. We're dealing with pregnant personnel's lives and safety. There's no room for error. So that is a really hard place to be applying statistical models in, because there's no such thing as 100% confidence in any outcome. So how do we continue to manage that friction? Right. So these are all hard, and I understand they're all very much big challenges. They're not little, they feel big, and they are big. And we are all having this conversation in various areas of the business. This doesn't mean we stop leveraging AI or analytics. This just means we do it with a lot of intentionality behind it, so that we get as many details as possible right, and we continue to grow in that area. And then since we talked a little bit about that cultural resistance piece, I do want to highlight how do we go about doing it. I've found that educating and building trust is really the best way to improve adoption of your models, and like fighting through that cultural resistance. And I like to describe it as a pyramid. So you start with transparency. I think it's just really, whether it's a one-on-one, whether it's a meeting, whether it's a conversation like this, where you just have a really good conversation on like, hey, what is it? What are you trying to do? What kind of data are you using? What type of modeling techniques are you using? And being able to share that you are the expert in your field, and you can actually explain what you're trying to do instead of like this big idea in the cloud. That helps people build trust in you and your capability, and allows for that initial barrier to be crossed. And then you can continue to educate around like capabilities and limitations of AI. AI is not the one answer to all of it, right? So there's really good capabilities of it, of simplifying and complex information, compiling complex information, and making big decisions, helping us make big decisions. But there are also limitations. Any model you build is as good as its defined parameters. So talking about the limitations also help people get over that next hump. It's like, okay, this person knows what they're doing, this person can explain what they're doing, and this person also understand that this is not the golden solution, that this is actually a solution with potential limitations, because understanding limitations allows us to be able to bring that human component into these conversations and refine our decision making. So it's not data driven decision making, it's really data informed decision making. And then storytelling. This is really, really important. If you don't have a story to tell, based in real world impact, you in a bit of a bad spot. So you have a model, you've done some work with it, and if you have some very compelling narratives that you can share that demonstrate real world impact, I think we are in a you can be in a really good place for be able for you to be able to influence big decisions, whether it's in your organization, whether it's your industry, whether it's in a government authority that makes these big decisions for us. So at the end of the day, what it comes down to is education, storytelling, to influence decisions, and build trust. And the more trust you build, the more you are able to influence in whatever way you're choosing to influence in your chosen area of expertise. Now that I've talked a little bit about the why, the how, the who, and then also how to succeed, I just want to end this with a bit of a call to action to let building a safer future together. So here, what it comes down to is this: it's AI gives us new tools to protect customers and improve operations, and we've seen it play out in various ways. It Having said all of that, it does take people to make it work right and make it make sense. So let's combine AI, so analytics, whatever you want to call it, data, and the human insight to lead the future of food safety, to be able to turn insights into impact. Because what you want to do is you want to influence a decision or policy, leveraging a compelling story that is based and that has high numerical value, which is where your data and impact comes from, and then your high narrative impact, that's your storytelling piece of a real world example. And that's the only way that we can really be mindful and meaningful in influencing business decisions, or like I said, regulatory decisions in this space, where we can actually leverage AI to turn insights that we gather into true impact in food safety. So with that, I'm going to take any questions you guys may have, and then we can go from there. I think Julie's going to be helping me.
Yep. So for the group, we encourage everybody to put your questions into the Q&A, which is at the bottom of your screen. And as those are coming in, Purni, this group, as we were preparing for the call, I was telling her all about how we started Women in AIDC and how this group is also about networking. So one of the things that I wanted to kick things off with is, could you tell us a little bit about your career journey and how you, got to where you are today?
Absolutely. It's an interesting story. So I was born in Sri Lanka, and I'm an only child who grew up in a family of basically two scientists. So when I was 9 years old, I think I knew I wanted to be a scientist. So I've continued to pursue a path in science since then. I had the wonderful opportunity to study all across the world during my academic career. And I ended up in the US, where I was doing my PhD at University of Tennessee. So go Vols, if there are any Tennessee fans around here. It's football season. I feel like I can say that. And since then, I went into Rutgers to do my postdoctoral work in 2020. So I did a lot of work around gut microbiota and women's health, and how hormone regulation is actually impacted by our gut microbiota. Some really, really cool research. But there was a point in academic research where I was getting a little bit into this cycle of you do some really cool research, you publish your research, you apply for a grant, and then you continue to be in that cycle. And I was, this is a very personal opinion of mine, I was struggling to really see the impact outside of me publishing a paper and presenting at a conference. So I was seeking opportunities, or looking at opportunities really, to be able to find a place where I can leverage my skill set and my knowledge into making an impact that transferred really well into community. And that's when Chick-fil-A came knocking. So I like to believe it's a little bit of fate. And I joined Chick-fil-A in 2020. And I feel like I get to live this life where today I um, get to leverage my food science skills, my chemistry skills, and just my personal skills. And I'm a big data nerd, so I've always been very interested in data science. So I get to sort of bring all of that alongside data science to make a true impact in every customer that comes to Chick-fil-A. I mean, we touch every one of our team members touch all our chicken that all of you eat, and we serve about 700 million pounds of chicken per year, and that's a lot of chicken. And I get to make sure that we keep our customers safe. So I feel like my skill sets have transferred. I found a place where my skill sets can really transfer to become meaningful and impactful, because I think that's what I was looking for as a
Yeah.
9-year-old.
I love that. Yeah, that's fantastic. Well, and tying to that passion of, making an impact, we've got a question from so I love this question because it's someone who came from the restaurant side. So front lines in the stores, right? Her question is, what keeps you up at night when you think about food safety in restaurants and the food supply chain?
I think produce keeps me up at night a lot. Um, Now, I also have a 2.5-year-old, so I do tend to sleep a lot these days because, whenever he lets me sleep, I sleep. So I don't stay awake. But if I have to pick one item that we serve that everybody serves, it's produce. And romaine lettuce specifically, I think, continues to be this beast that we continue to try to tackle in ways as many possible ways as we can to ensure that we manage cold chain, that we receive it at the right temperature, that we receive it without any pathogens, that we receive it like we receive it in really good quality. And those two things seems to butt heads a lot of the times too, especially transition recent seasons. So I will say between restaurant operations and also the supply chain side of it, produce items tend to keep me up at night. And then you throw in the traceability aspect of produce items and how hard it is to trace where it came from, exactly when it was picked and where it was picked, and all those details, which is really important if you're thinking about like risk management and risk modeling. You need to sort of know all those details, but not all that information is really centralized. And I think I was hoping FSMA would have kind of gotten us close to that, but we pushed away a little bit from FSMA because of some government changes. So having said that, yeah, I think produce items just rough out here.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of people on this call who are probably nodding their heads because yes, produce is definitely a challenge. And to that end, you were just touching on the tracing piece, and there was a question about the automatic data capture. One of the things like with barcodes, like GS1128 barcodes, where it has that extended data, the lot codes, and other information that could go into these models, as well as things like RFID. Now we're down to
Mhm.
serialization of the boxes, right? So we
Mhm.
know each and every box. So um, when we look at like adding that data capture piece to an AI model, does that kind of add to the accuracy, right? Because we're using electronic systems to accurately capture information. Does that enhance, like, what kind of things how does that add to that data accuracy piece that you talked about?
I think it gives more visibility into the story you're trying to tell. So you're not just trying to say, hey, I received this produce item at this temperature from this supplier, and this is what happened. I am now able to say I received it on this day from this production run or this lot code, this serial number, and from this supplier, it was picked on this day. So you can actually pinpoint enough information to go really lean into your diagnostic analytics piece instead of just guessing it's from this supplier and that's all I know about that. So I think that onion outbreak was a really good one, right? The E. coli and onion outbreak. Like we kind of had a picture of how it played out. But if we had all of the information on exactly what happened, where it came from, who was picking it, what date it was picked, all of that information, I think it allows for you to be more confident in your model and then models, and then also allow for you to actually build more meaningful diagnostic or leverage more meaningful diagnostic models, which I don't think we have the capability today.
Gotcha. Yeah. And I think we're headed there, but the food industry is slow. And so, in preparation for this call, you and I were talking about like what do you see as the future use of AI in the food industry and what opportunities are there? And we had that conversation about like our iPhones and adopting new technology. Do you want to share that with the audience?
Yeah, I think it goes back to the slide I shared a little bit on like anticipating the challenges. This is not easy. I don't think there is anybody who's doing this work that's gonna tell you this is really easy work. It's really fun work, but it's not really easy. So it's one of those things. There are challenges. We have to anticipate the challenges. We have to problem solve and figure out how do we navigate through them. And the answer is not necessarily just to back away from it because we don't trust it or because we don't feel like we don't have the right data. The answer is to like try to do it in a slow and steady way, but continuing to evolve with the industry. So just because ChatGPT hallucinates doesn't mean I don't use ChatGPT, right? Or just because I mean, iPhones have their own issues, but I would guarantee at least 40% of us on this call have the newest iPhone because of that new feature on that new camera, which is very cool. So how do we keep up with the technology enhancement and the advancements without falling behind as an industry is really important. And I do think sometimes we tend to do that. And this is not unique to the food industry, but we do that. So how do we continue to understand what the technology advancements are, not getting ahead of ourselves, do it in a meaningful way, but sort of manage those two tangible things that are moving a little bit on the opposite ways, but continuing to move forward. I think that's my encouragement, and that's what I get to do a lot here at Chick-fil-A is I get to build the models, but I get to talk about it in a way that highlights, hey, it's is it 100% accurate all the time? No, but are we moving in the right direction? Are we chipping away at what the capabilities? Absolutely. And I think that's what we need to be doing. And that's what technology is. And I feel like that's what science is. Nobody knows the complete answer all the time.
For sure, for sure. Yeah. And we had talked about how lots of companies in the food industry, they invest in technology and then they use it for 30 years or 40 years.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But they definitely got their money's worth, right, on some of those old systems. But as industries moving forward, right, it almost feels like as you're doing these models and kind of looking at your supply chain, sometimes you might pinpoint and say, hey, if we could get better data here, right, then that might mean the investment in, hey, let's get off of paper and pencil and start scanning barcodes, or let's move off of something that's manual that could be automated, and maybe they were just waiting for the system to break before they made the investment. But like the AI could maybe find some of those opportunities just in the data model, I would almost think.
Yeah, and I think there's also the opportunity for us to be able to really lean into the real world complexities. And I say this to every time I speak to somebody in academia, I tend to talk about this a lot, where um sometimes as I was an academic, so I feel like I can say this. Sometimes we model things that's like the perfect scenario, but and then we remove any variability that we can't really account for. But that's not the reality in life. There are so many variables and there's so many realities that concurrently occur that could impact your model. So my encouragement is for industry and the technology companies also to work with the people who are going to be using your technology to understand what are the real world capabilities they need. Like if you are building an alerting system that does real-time monitoring of some type of a refrigerator unit, understanding what your customer is looking for is really important too, right? So maybe I don't need to know all the ambient temperature in my unit. Maybe I need to figure out what does that mean for the product, right? Maybe my ambient temperature is 50 degrees, but that doesn't mean my product is above 40 degrees. So maybe I don't have to throw my product away. But if I just really lean into only the ambient temperature, maybe I encourage my team members to throw the product away. So just understanding what the customer is looking for, what the restaurant realities or the business realities are, and partnering across the board between food industry, the technology experts, and also academia to like really start pulling data together for real world situations as opposed to the perfect scenario, I think will allow all of us to like continue to evolve in our respective spaces. Because I think if one of us evolves and the others don't, that really doesn't mean a whole lot. I think this food safety is what shared responsibility. We need to all evolve together and have that continuous conversation. The opportunities like these, I think, are really great for that to get that conversation going.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and one of the questions, which I think ties into what you just talked about, was discussing the visibility and acceptance of AI at the restaurant level. So it sounds like some of the things that you're applying to the supply, like they might not even realize that AI is behind what,
Yeah.
driving. Because yeah, your Chat GPT point is a good one, right? Like folks use things in different ways. Companies have different I've been on calls where folks are like, you can't use a bot to take notes on this call, right? They'll say, we don't want that, so turn that off. So, within the, within an organization, companies, like team members might not even realize that AI is driving some parts of their job. It's part of that data set that says, hey, like you said, the refrigerator is going to beep at you, or something's going to happen, but the data behind it was actually, and the analytics to make the fridge beep were driven by all this content.
Yeah. And I think it's a very delicate balance because you have different audiences and different people need to see different things and different audiences need different stories. So my 16-year-old team member who's there for 6 hours a day doesn't want to understand all of the work I did to build the model. They want to understand that if that beeps, that means I have to take it out or throw it away. Like there's this very operational information they need versus maybe somebody like me or my partners within the company need to understand it at a different level for us to be able to provide the tools and opportunities for the team member to execute what's expected out of them really well. So there are different audiences, and then different audiences need to be able to see different things. And I will also say there's different applications of AI to those different audiences. So, for example, if you're a company that drives if you're a food company and you have all these restaurants or you have team members that work in your restaurant, maybe you give them your own version of ChatGPT that they can ask very targeted questions around your specific procedures, your specific processes, your specific policies, which then they'll be, instead of calling somebody at the corporate center, they can just Chat GPT version of it, whatever they call it, to do that. So at Chick-fil-A, we have what's called Tango, where team members are able to interact with and ask some questions and understand, hey, what do I need to do? So especially like during training, those are really good ways to do it instead of pulling up your phone and like having to log into something and then looking at a procedure or having to call somebody in an emergency to be like, what do I do next? It's just one of those ways of leveraging AI in the restaurant in a very operationally targeted way. Whereas for me, maybe that's not what I need. What I need is the big data set that I can lean into, understand or develop a model, and then lean into exactly where is my risk. So I can lean into the predictive analytics or the diagnostic analytics, whereas all of that will lead to developing a solution that they can leverage to do their job. The only thing that only they can do really well inside the restaurant as they serve our customers. So I'd encourage you
Yeah.
to think through that, like
Yeah.
different audience, different stories.
Sure, sure. All right. And we've got one last question because we're getting close on time. And it's funny because I had written this question down as well. So it's around the data quality conundrum. So the question is, data not only needs to be centralized, but normalized, harmonized, and cleaned up. Any
Mhm.
suggestions on that?
Think it depends on your data. I hate this answer. It depends on your data, it depends on how much data, and it depends on your application that you're trying to pull it into, and then also your final outcome threshold. So as a company or as a person, you get to define what is your acceptable variability that you'll accept, right? Because I will tell you, in statistics, there's no such thing as an exact prediction. It's a prediction, right? So it's an estimation. So you're going to have a certain amount of standard deviation that you either accept or you don't. So all of that will define how you go about cleaning and normalizing your data and optimizing your data. I don't even say normalizing, optimizing your data for that specific use case. Happy to chat more if you have a very specific use case in your mind. But I will say the best way to go about it is to, I've found a lot of success with it, is to bring your data science people, so your statisticians, your analysts together with your SMEs, so your scientists, your data engineers together to talk through what am I trying to solve for and how much data am I trying to leverage here. Is it 100 rows on Excel or is it like millions of rows per day? And then bringing the stakeholders into the room to have that conversation, and then also bringing a decision maker into the room to say, hey, how much risk are we willing to accept? Because that's the reality. You're gonna have to have a certain amount of standard deviation. Maybe it's just 1 degree of temperature, I'm just making it up, or it's 1 degree of whatever. But based on all of that, you're able to then lean into how you want to optimize your data. And that's the best I can do with a very general question. But like I said, happy to chat more if you wanna, whoever the question person was, to chat more on your specific use case. Because I hear you. It
Yeah.
is very interesting.
Yeah, yeah. There's only like I can validate that it's complete and that standardized lists are, standardized fields are met and field lengths and all that. But yes, the actual is this what actually happened? Yeah.
Yeah. And then the one more thing I would bring to the table is also just that, like I said, like understanding exactly what you're trying to do with your data is really important, because all those data columns are going to be variables, right? So each of those variables are going to play a different part in your final model. So some of those are going to be really important and some of those are going to be not very important. You have to build a preliminary model to sort of understand the impact of each variable. So you're going to have to clean some of the data, but in the grand scheme of things, maybe out of all the data sets you have, like 8 data sets you have, the model only really pulls most impact out of 6 data sets. So then you'll also be able to optimize how many data sets you need to clean and normalize to your point, or optimize in any way, in a meaningful way. That's why I'm saying bring your collaborators and your stakeholders together to understand the why behind what you're trying to do, to allow for the best use of your time. Because if we all go about cleaning all the data that we get all the time, God bless us.
That's a great way to end this. Yes, God bless us. Yeah, on that whole thing. So, well, thank you so much. I knew we would fill the whole hour, and here we are right at the top of the hour. So, thank you everyone who attended, and thank you for your questions. And Purni, thank you for taking the time to meet with this group. We really, truly appreciate it, and thank you for sharing your insights.
Thank you, Julie. Thank you, everyone.